How's it going, everybody? This is Aaron the Pedantic, and I have my friend here, Dark Knight of Hibernia. Go ahead and say hello.
Hello.
Oh, I guess you could introduce yourself or something, or I could introduce you.
No, it's all good.
We'll let you do it. We'll let you do it.
I'm just DK to everyone on the server. So
yeah. So I was kind of anticipating there being more people on here, but I guess they're busy. It's normally the time that people are playing in Prince of Nothing's B2 game, but he can't run today, and
he's with his imaginary Canadian girlfriend, so he's a little preoccupied.
Canadian girlfriend. Yes, because as we all know, there is no way that a nerd would ever have a girlfriend.
No, just a Dutch.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. There are two things I can't stand: the people who are intolerant of other people's cultures, and the Dutch. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, I was kind of hoping we would have more people on, because it is a subject that I think, it definitely pulled up a lot of controversy on Twitter, and
because as we know, Twitter is where reasonable and level-headed discussions always occurs.
Exactly. Malaki says, yeah, Aaron, some of us are working. Yeah, I normally would be working right now, but got the rest of the day off. So, it is stream catchy-uppy time.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, cool. We will have Bloodworth. DM Bloodworth will be stopping by. So that's cool.
Sweet.
Let's see. Maybe we'll wait for him to get started on that one proper then. Hank says, my players encountered a sleeping dragon this morning. Oh, there's Zergus. I call him Zergus.
Hello, good sir.
Hello, how you doing?
Pretty good.
All right, let's test your mic. Say something. Okay. Yeah, it's hearable. I would make sure that you've got your right microphone selected, because it's coming in like could be a second.
A little scratchy.
Perhaps. Let's see. Norn's nailed it on the head. He says, "Oh no, this is about the terrible Twitter topic that keeps popping up." I feel
I don't know.
I know that Bloodworth has things to say on it, so I feel like it'll only be proper to wait for him for that particular discussion. But we could start with the whole damage thing first.
I would like to say though, Norn, you saying the terrible Twitter topic, that does not narrow it down, good sir.
Well, but they come in, it's like
in waves.
The cycling of the tides, and this particular tide was the one about violence. It'll be another one in a few days. That's just how it works. I'm a bad host. So Zerbus, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Zerbus. I am the spinach thing comes from a joke that we made on your Discord a long time ago about the 5e races, where I decided I was going to RP as a bowl of spinach. That was going to be my character race.
That is deep lore, Zerbus, man. That was
like a year ago.
Yeah, so, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah. And a safety tool because safety tools are funny to me.
Malaki says OGGM put a good video on the violence topic yesterday. That is true, especially in reference to 5th edition D&D. So, it looks like Bloodworth is here.
Oh, nice.
Hello there.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
You sound perfectly clear.
Oh,
it's going well. How about you?
Sure.
Well, since you're here, that means that we can engage in the big topic, the violence topic. And I already know that we may disagree on this going in, but that's fine. I'm all about disagreements, as long as they are civil. So since we're finally getting started, I guess I'll explain what happened. So there was a Twitter thread, and I don't want to misquote it. So I'm actually going to read the actual thread. And the whole reason that I'm bringing this up is because, number one, I think it's an interesting topic, and secondly, I think people were a little mean to the guy. But I'm a big softie, and I will accept that. Damn, where the hell is? Oh, that's why it's not on there. It's because Okay, here we go. So here's what it says. So D&D gives you the ability to do violence and no justification for that violence. Oh, how did I miss the no part? Okay, so all right, well, let's continue. So the entire game is about characters seeking out violence to justify their own violence or simply accepting their status as murderers. And yeah, there is always room for exceptions and a refusal of the search to justify one's violence. But it is important to name this play as a refusal and opening and recognize how difficult and unsupported this is. There is no place in the book where we are told why we might interact with one another except to assist one another in killing something. Again, you can always play in ways that are unsupported by the mechanics, but it's just very hard to do this, especially for new players. Culture in D&D land operates in the same way that culture in the real world operates. It exists at the ends of the law, or in this case, at the ends of the rules. That's basically the gist of it. So first off, I have to admit that I misread it when I first read the damn thing. And that kind of changes a little bit of where my opinion lands, I guess. Let's hear what you guys have to say about this first. So I guess we'll just go round clockwise. DK, what are your thoughts on this?
But D&D is about violence and how players justify their violence. Okay. Well, I wasn't aware that Pat Robinson got a Twitter. The 700 Club is coming into D&D again, boys. No.
Well,
fictional violence is not a way to justify violent behavior. People are not sociopaths. No.
There is one thing that I do want to address, and that is that a lot of people are, this is just me being a pedant, I guess, but there are a lot of people that are saying or bringing into this that there is a moral judgment that is being placed on that. And I know that outside of this particular thread, and, in the context of the conversation at large, usually there does tend to be a moral judgment where they're saying it's about violence and that's bad. That tends to be what is being said there. Now, I did hear from the guy. He said that it's not inherent, what he said was that he was agreeing with most people that were mad at him about this because he was trying to say that D&D is not a story game. And with that, I was like,
true.
Yeah, I was like, I can't really hate you on that, and yeah. So I just wanted to make sure it was clear that there wasn't anything there that was saying, and that's bad. It's about violence and that's a bad thing. It's about justifying violence and that's a bad thing. I mean, I guess there may be an inherent, one that we would consider. We would say, justification of violence is inherently a bad thing, so it doesn't need to be said. But I don't know.
Allow me to be appended there, Aaron. It's not that justifying violence is bad. It's just the fact that if you try to justify something, you're on the defensive, because on some level you believe that, because that what you're doing is wrong, so you're trying to moralize and make it less bad than it is. That's typically what justification is. And yeah, I see you, Dolly. You're wrong. Sorry, cancel Dolly. She's wrong. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Listen to her force her way into this thing.
She's your wife, man. You can invite her. Nothing's stopping you.
You're going to the doghouse.
But that's what I have to say for the moment. Why don't we pass it on to you, Zerbus?
D&D isn't a game about violence any more than like Minecraft or Fortnite or World of Warcraft or any of the Marvel cinematic movies that people are watching with their 5-year-olds. Of course, it's got violence in it, but it's not all violence. It's not teaching violence. If you want to look at it from another way, D&D isn't a game about violence any more than it is about adventure, mathematics, exploration, socialization, friendship. By the nature of it all, being an adventure and exploration game based in a fantasy world populated by things that want to eat you, of course there's going to be violence. It also teaches you teamwork. It also teaches you how to work together. You could say all these other things that go along with it, because his tweet sounded full of hyperbole in a way that was implied of what his statement was. But I don't think that it's fair to say that any one thing. I mean, what if he just came out and said that Robert Downey Jr. promotes violence because he's in violent movies? That's ridiculous. This guy's retarded.
Yeah.
Hey, you're trying to get me demonetized. Canceled. Just about.
Yeah. Honestly, the fact that saying that games or movies or books are violence, it's ridiculous. They're not violent because they're not doing anyone any harm.
Let me requalify that. Intellectually dishonest. This guy is not being completely intellectually honest about it. I don't think. I think that there's a definitely but that comes up from when you say like D&D is about violence. I mean, yeah, it's got violence in it, but look at all these other things. I think that it's a very it sounds like a hot take that was designed to be a hot take to get a reaction. That's what it sounds like to me.
Well, it succeeded.
It sounds like it's almost like a Kafka trap. Like it's like, since we know Dave steals from people, like stole the bike, is there a way that we can reform Dave? It's like, but have we ever asked, did Dave actually steal the bike? We're just assuming, like there's no way to get rid of the presupposition that it is inherently violent when it isn't. We've never asked, is it violent? We just jumped headlong and assumed from the get-go that it is. And
it's just as much a problem-solving game or a socialization game than it is a game that also has violence in it. I mean, you're running around in a game with dragons and ogres like that want to eat you, so you stop yourself from getting eaten. You save others from being eaten. Yeah, that's my take on it.
All right, Bloodworth.
Okay. Well, first of all, I never saw the original tweet because he has block banned me. So I was like, I've never seen this person before. When I tried to look down his, never interacted with them. When I tried to look at the original tweet, I was like, you are banned. I was like, okay, this is someone who, looks through a list of, a list of followers on someone else's, Twitter account and just block bans. So that was the first thing. But the second, what I really, pushed back on once I saw at least a portion of what he tweeted, and you read the full tweet now, was that the game supports violence without justification. All right, and that tells me that he never read, he never read anything that Gary Gygax wrote, right in the front of whether it be the Player's Handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide or whatever, where it keeps on pushing the idea that you are playing a character in a heroic fantasy. Now, when you say heroic fantasy, that implies that everything that you were doing is justified. All right, or at least that's what the intention is. All right, there is no place in the Dungeon Master's Guide, or the Player's Handbook where it suggests that murder hoboing is the best practice. All right, now Gary actually writes, he says, you can play an evil character, but he did not see that as a viable long-term pattern of behavior for your characters. You're eventually going to get hunted down and exterminated because you are the bad guy, and so he says, is there a place for that? Sure, if you want to do that on a short-term campaign or whatever, but that's not really what the game is designed to do. So if this guy is saying that, this is a means of just unjustifiable, violence, for the sake of violence, that's not what the game is designed to do, and that's not, what it says it's designed to do. Then he tried to make that connection. It's just like the real world, because I know you had tweeted, hey, he didn't get political. Well, yes, he did. He got political as soon as he tried to make a real world connection. All right, and that is where you're saying, it goes back to like the disclaimer. It was wrong then, and it's wrong now. You know what I'm saying? It's trying to disparage. Once again, it's trying to disparage the game at its core. And that's why I push back on it and say, this guy is just a troll, and there's no reason to pay any real attention to him.
Yeah, well, so
I don't get
just
the intent of a.
What were you gonna say?
No, go for. No, you go ahead, Aaron. No, you go.
I was just gonna say that with what he was saying about it being just like the real world, it was talking about how you have to judge things. Well, this is what I drew from it, was that he was trying to say you have to judge things within the context of laws, and then he was equating that to like rules of the rule book and that kind of thing. That's kind of how I took it. Again, yeah, I think that my brain, I probably have a bias that leans toward trying to disassociate everything from politics as much as possible, just because I'm like, I don't feel like dealing with it right now. So, that could be just Aaron's personal blind spot, but yeah, I do think that's interesting. Shield, what do you have to say? I don't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah,
it is
barely. I can
quiet.
faintly.
Let me see if I can turn you up.
I'd say I view D&D mainly as an adventure game. Violence is kind of optional 90% of the time. And I think the idea that violence is like the only answer to every problem is just quite a narrow gameplay or quite a narrow style of play, basically, which I generally don't enjoy, because I don't think long extended combats are the be all and end all of D&D, basically. But
it's a waste of resources, to be honest.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, I obviously this is about probably 5e, I'm guessing. But older editions of D&D, you go into a fight every time you're taking a risk, basically. So it's,
It's country time lemonade, okay?
Yeah. Aaron had to explain that. Aaron had to explain that one to me, because I'm a filthy Euro trash.
Yeah. He's like, what in the hell is that? And I'm like, it's plastic, damn it.
So
No, it's just the cap. It was the cap that threw me. That's all.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of this might be the way like new D&D does XP. Like you only get XP from killing monsters or dealing with monsters. Is the other thing that's less talked about.
Well, in a sense, that's what they wanted to do, but they don't actually do that. At least in my experience, they don't.
Aren't they all using milestone XP?
Milestone, yep.
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, they're not. They're not. They're using leveling up without XP, because milestone still uses XP. I've had to explain this many times. Milestone is just like they've completed something that I appreciate. So I'm going to give them this amount of like an arbitrary amount of experience points for it. That's how it's defined in the DMG. A lot of people don't know that.
Well, I've actually been where they do milestone. The only difference is they just say you level up.
No. That's
that's
leveling up without
the only
XP.
way I've seen it done.
There's it's a very specific terminology. It's in the DMG.
Okay.
I did a video on that at one point. Just because it drives me. I'm trying to avoid the bad words, but I think Zervis.
You've already
did that.
Yeah, he already screwed the pooch.
The R word.
That's sorry. Well, that's why gold for XP is the best system. It's the most gameable system.
Yes, let's definitely get to that in a second.
I like the DCC one better. Get 1 to 4 XP per encounter, or
I mean, this is about to become
or
the
just
XP podcast.
no, we won't go on that tangent. I'm just saying.
No, but Shield, you 100% nailed what I was going to say on the matter, and that is that he was definitely framing this in terms of 5th edition, because if you're looking from the view of 5th edition, so whenever I finally appropriately read what he said and I saw there is no justification for the violence, I was like, oh, he's clearly not talking about 1st edition, because there's every justification for the violence in 1st edition, because alignment means something. In 5th edition, they've been trying to disassociate alignment from any kind of cosmological scale, it feels like, or just any of that tradition of, I see somebody who's chaotic evil and I'm lawful good, so I have to murder them, for the better of the world. And so by using that lens, like, there isn't really as much justification in 5th edition. And if you look at what you give XP for, most directly, you give XP for combat. You give XP for killing things. You can't, I mean, there are options in there for giving XP for other things, but it's not really, even though the playstyle now, as y'all are mentioning, it leans toward milestone, it's not the assumed like design method, I would say. That's just kind of like, I don't know, it's just the play culture now. People don't like math. They're afraid. They see more than 3 lines of, 3 numerical digits in a row, and then they're like, brain shuts down.
You just can't.
I think there is some stuff in the DMG about giving XP for other things, but it doesn't give like a solid numerical equation or anything about how much you give per level or something, which might be useful.
Yes, there is.
Yes, there's a DMG. I highly recommend it.
No, he's saying it for 5e. Yes, there is a DMG for 5e.
It's pretty
I know
good.
it's a shock because nobody ever reads it, and I'm guilty of that too.
That's the biggest problem with 5e. Well, okay, so the DMG for 5e exists. It's decent.
Old man shouts at moon.
Other than like the first, like the first half of the book is okay, but it's not really necessary because it's just about how to world build, and it's like it's okay. How to come up with villains, plot lines. Which plot lines is something I don't worry about. But then like the second half is actually pretty decent, but they don't take the same authoritative stance that Gary Gygax does, where you have like an exact vision for what exactly the game is supposed to look like, and that gives you a really good set of guidelines to understand the identity of what Dungeons and Dragons is. 5th edition, not so much. It's just like, it's a fantasy adventure game, and you can get XP.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah, magic. Like, how does magic work? Well, there's like a weave or something, and you manipulate it, I guess. Who cares? Screw you.
The divine magic is the magic of the gods. Divine magic is the magic of the gods, and arcane magic is made by the gods, but it's totally different.
Okay. Well,
hey, geek.
All right, so this Yield Geek says it was all right. This might have been in the middle of a discussion. Otherwise, it was always the intention that you get XP for encounters, not necessarily for killing. When you say always, okay, so I haven't read OD&D as explicitly as I have first edition, but I'm pretty sure that first edition you get XP for killing, but it's like very minor. And then you get, then I know that you get XP for gold, which is the way of champions.
You also get XP in AD&D. You also get XP for defeating, which doesn't necessarily mean killing. So defeating, like subdual will give you half. And you could say, then the DM has the control to spread that out amongst other things too. So you get XP for evading a confrontation. At least most DMs I've ever heard of.
I do. I
treat it as a partial defeat of what you're encountering. So, that's again just another, misinterpretation, or misunderstanding of how the system was set up. Like I'll admit, I don't know how fifth edition handles it as far as the DMG is concerned, but I'm more familiar with the milestone which you're getting from the starter boxes, which most people don't go beyond, and that's why everybody thinks the milestone is the way it is. Like if you read, the essentials kit, that's all milestone. That's, you go through level by level for, if you do three mini adventures, you go up one level. You do another 2 of these, then you go up to the next, and so on. I think that's how most people actually play, because the Wizards of the Coast says that, when they did their internal polling or whatever, they said the average campaign lasts 6 sessions. And that's what it takes to go through those starter boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
So whenever I completely misunderstood the subject, and I guess somebody brought up murder hoboing for a moment, and I think that is an important myth that should be busted about classic D&D, is this whole idea that it was all about murder hoboism. And one of the things that I have been kind of talking about a lot is the different things in the Dungeon Master's Guide that all point toward the player characters really needing to be part of society. I don't know how much how do y'all feel about that?
But like the killing monsters indiscriminately or killing people indiscriminately harms your reputation within society. I mean, if you're killing innocent civilians, I would imagine that would reflect poorly on you in a general society.
I'm just saying that if they didn't want thieves to recklessly steal from everyone, why did they measure out how much gold everyone had in the village of Hamlet?
Okay, so that's an interesting point.
I'm convinced he didn't do that for any specific reason other than to just be thoroughly detailed, and then he realized on future modules that was just not feasible.
What I would say is that this could be just my post hoc rationalization, but me seeing all of the this farmer has this much, all that kind of stuff. That combined with seeing, what are the prices in the town, and there's this explanation about all that, tells me, what are people's life savings going to look like? What is that? What should that look like? I mean, you could say that it's there just in case they decide to go on a stealing spree.
Yeah,
but I feel like maybe part of it is to just help you understand, how much money should a poor villager have. That was one of the things I saw, those things, and I'm like, either he is just trying to make it where it is rather rewarding to go around and steal from people, or he's trying to say, there's a pretty decent amount of gold on these people, and some of them have magic items. Like, it's one of the reasons that I kind of feel like AD&D suggests a world that has a pretty decent number of magic items in it. They're all over the place. Not, there aren't magic shops or anything like that necessarily. But at the same time, magic items are in pretty decent numbers out there to be found, and to curse you.
I mean,
I don't know. What do you think about that?
I just wanted to point out, the old geek said the gold in Hamlet was Gygax designing an example town to help DMs. I'm probably thinking that's the only reason he put it there, just to teach DMs that, hey, these people live in a society that uses a currency. They should probably have a currency to buy things that they need. And
that's what it did for me.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, why wouldn't normal people have gold? To me, I don't think Gygax was too much of a gamist to say, hey, people are going to steal, therefore I should put money. I don't think he would do that. I'd say he would just put money in there, and if the thief wants to steal it, they can try. You know. So, but that's just me.
All right, looks like nobody else has anything to add on it. So whenever it comes to, proof that the player character should be involved in society, here's some of the things that I was thinking about. First off, patrols. So I bring that up because patrols, anytime that you are in a civilized area, there's a 5 in 20 chance whenever you have a random encounter in the wilderness that you're going to encounter patrols. If you look at how patrols are constructed, they are led by usually like, I think, six level fighters with another like 4th or 5th level fighter, several more 1st and 2nd level fighters, and then like 13 to 24 men at arms, and all of them. Well, okay, all of the fighters are in plate mail, and they have great weapons. They have great armor. You have the men at arms. They're going to be wearing scale mail. They're going to be using shields, or possibly chain. So all of this, you have all these people that are pretty damn tough. They're going around, and if you're going around murder hoboing, your name is going to get out. Maybe even your appearance, what your traveler group looks like. They're going to see you. They're all on horseback. They might be able to outrun you if you try to run away. So there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be in some serious shit. That's kind of what I look at. And that's not even accounting for the fact that whenever I generate patrols, I also look at, well, we have a 6th level fighter. What magic items might they have? Go through the chart, go through those things. And so a lot of times, like, they are decked out. And so you'd have to be a pretty tough amigo to be pissing people off in civilized areas and just getting away with it.
And in a world that's supposed to be believable, if there's a society where people are generally corralled towards living a peaceful life, then there would have to be repercussions for behaving like that, right? And that would just happen naturally, like your example of patrols. I mean, there's a million other things that would happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say in a longer lasting campaign, you're going to have, or you should have, consequences, both positive and negative, for player actions or I should say character actions and including their inactions as well. So let's say you have the player character group is going out there and they have a task and they fail at the task for whatever reason. They just weren't able to do it. The princess was eaten by the troll, and then they come back and they say, with apology, we just didn't get there in time. Now they might not get thrown into they might not
a dungeon.
They might not get thrown into a dungeon for that, but it's certainly going to hurt their reputation. All right, it might be harder for them to get a job later on. And if they consistently either fail to or ignore what they were tasked to do, or they just go outright and go totally rogue and murder hoboing, instead, those consequences are going to impact going forward. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if they're going out there and they're doing things that are very positive for the community at large, their reputation is going to grow. They're going to find that things get sold to them a little bit cheaper. People are approaching them with offers for them to help them out or whatever. It just overall, it's going to continue to generate more and more positive, as they're going along, and they'll be encouraged to continue doing that. That's where that heroic fantasy thing comes in that Gary was really pushing. It's like it becomes a self-perpetuating, type of or encouraging thing for them to continue to do. So, actions and inactions, do have consequences, and that's what the game is really designed to do. Is to make that your gameplay practice.
Yeah, this is an interesting comment. Rodrigo says, "Why is it that actions have consequences needs to be taught and reinforced? What the hell happened to people?" And I mean,
a long and lengthy discussion would need to unpack that, man.
yeah, it's interesting because okay, as far as the wider culture, that is a whole other topic. As far as being specific to role-playing games, maybe you can blame Hickman. Just because
you be hating on Hickman so much lately, Aaron.
Well, but it seems to be okay. I mean, I wasn't there. Bloodworth may have more knowledge on this than me, but a lot of people, they tend to point Hickman and the Ravenloft and all this kind of stuff and Dragonlance to being this point of transition that ended up getting to the White Wolf stuff, and this I don't know, this idea that you need to do stories, and you need to then that from the stories thing, it's like, well, maybe we should let the stories be shared among the players too, let them have some more control over it. And in doing so, you get to this point where in using consequences on the players is bad. It's undesirable, because really what we should be doing is we should be facilitating them making their dreams come true, making the dramatic things that they're interested in possible. And I don't know.
That's Hickman?
Maybe, like I said, this is from a lot of other people's takes. I mean, I have I6, and I'm not seeing exactly what people are saying about how
I6 is good.
led to all that. But go ahead.
That's because I6 is good. The whole Dragonlance railroady modules, those things are those are exactly what you're talking about. But I think that's a long path to go from like Dragonlance railroad story telling to White Wolf, where there's kids running around town with katanas on their backs, like in your actual real life city, because they're live action role playing and stuff. There's a big stretch that goes all the way up to the 5th edition. I mean, that's and going all the way back to Hitman, I think, is a little unfair. Granted, the way that D&D started was, it was always a story game, but it wasn't about it being a story game in itself. It's about having stories that came out of the play, right? And that shift that came with the Dragonlance module series, if that's where people want to draw that line in the sand, that was where it became, no, D&D is the story, rather than, oh, you guys will never believe what we went down into the 3rd level and this happened. And then have you ever read the DCC modules where they talk about the playtesting?
No, I haven't read the ones.
So I just finished DMing the One Who Watches from Below, and they have a pretty crazy story from like their playtest sessions, and those are stories that just came out from what happened. That's where the dice landed. Always fun to read. Those are fun stories. But the story about like, okay, we're going to go save the world, and we're going to start at this inn, and we're going to meet up with all our old friends, and we're going to go through these exact plot points. That's just a completely different style of game that came about when Hickman and Weiss started doing their modules, which was basically just all marketing, because they're trying to sell books, and they're trying to sell books so that they have marketable characters, right?
So you're saying that they're putting stuff in the water that's turning the people into story gamers?
Yes. They started it.
Yes.
But I6 is good. I6 is great. Pharaoh is good too.
I'll have to check Pharaoh out. Well, Ash of Creativity is here. Better known at this point on the channel as Appendix N Terrorist.
Well, yes, this was forced upon me by unsavory characters. Some might consider even inappropriate.
But
go ahead.
How goes the conversation?
Yeah, so we were just we were just addressing the whole is D&D a inherently violent game kind of thing, and just going from there. Oh yeah. So I was more talking specifically about different things in AD&D that suggest that the player characters need to be involved in society in some ways. So I was talking about patrols. I was going to talk about training, because training is very, very important. You need to have people like you for that, for training, if you're using training rules, which I know a lot of people throw it out the window. And I think that that's unfortunate, because I think training rules are really, really, even if the actual logistics of them are kind of rough. If you look at like the pricing in first edition, holy crap, that's like every single penny you've got. And then, if you've got your monthly expenses on top of that, and you've got taxation, it's like, okay, so now I owe the crown, what little money I had left. Actually, even more than that. I'm in the red.
Right. Now I need to go out and adventure again. There's a lot of pressure in the earlier games. In fifth edition, not only is that pressure evaporated, the game has no mode of play besides combat.
Right.
So OP was actually, as far as I'm concerned, like completely correct, unambiguously correct.
When you're talking about fifth edition, I feel like yes.
Yeah.
With
my default assumption is when somebody says D&D, they are either talking about AD&D, if I'm talking about the Bro SR, and everybody else is talking about the current edition.
Yeah, but that's because you've probably purged yourself of the dirty what is it? What is it y'all call the gross nerds of the OSR?
The gross nerds of the OSR.
Yeah.
The based nerds of the OSR. Thank you.
That's not what we said.
Well, you're wrong.
That term is reserved for people who use training rules reliably.
Which I do.
Oh, congratulations on being Bro SR.
I did not consent to that, sir.
It's not a matter of consent. We've kidnapped you. We're terrorists. We don't really care about the whole consent thing.
No. Okay. But
I love you.
go for it.
This right here. JP Morris says the rules are good. It's just too expensive. That's kind of my thing. I mean, so you could. They're doable, probably, as written. With 1,500 gold pieces times level every week for as many weeks, depending on how well you do. I feel like, is that doable? Yes, but what it's going to do is that you're gonna cap out on XP. You're going to have to go out and find ways to make money. You're not going to get any XP for that time being, until you can finally raise it up enough in order to pay for it. It just makes it take longer. That's just kind of how I see it. It's just going to take longer, which is fine if that's what you want to do.
You also have a rating system that makes it cheaper, though.
Yeah, it does. It does, but still at the minimum end. If you think about it this way, the minimum is going to be 1,500 times level, right? But if you look at most classes, they need at minimum they're gonna get enough to level up by the time they get 1,250 to maybe like 27 something for, I don't know, paladins or some crap. It's going to be somewhere around that point. So they'll have just enough maybe to level if their XP comes strictly from GP, which it probably won't, but it'll be mostly from GP. Which means that they, if they didn't do excellent, then they're going to need twice as much as of GP as they do XP. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
need
also,
outsource.
once they reach fifth level, they can start training themselves and collecting that same kind of an income to offset their own training. All right, that's where you start having them bring in followers, or what I call like mentees, who will eventually become their followers as well. Plus, again, if you're doing a very long-term campaign, they're going to start creating, side gigs. that are happening when they're off adventuring and other things are running in the background, where they're generating, the funds that they will need. But in my own campaign, they did end up hitting a couple spots where they had the XP, but didn't have the gold resources in order to pay for that training. And that's the design of the game. I mean, it's meant to do that. I know that in an interview, Ernie Gary Gygax Jr. was saying that his character, had to sell off magic items, just to have enough to go from, I believe it was like 12th to 13th level, because it was, that's really the way it was designed. Now, fortunately, Gary Gygax was the Monty Hall DM, so there was plenty of treasure and magic items to fill up their coffers and their storerooms and everything, where they'd have that ability to just sell stuff off. But there's other ways that you can do it without making it so bloated with magic items, by just having these side things going on. In my own group, what they're doing is that they had gone into an abandoned mine and discovered a new vein, and now they're working on hiring the the miners and the guards and everything like that. They secured a deed for it from the local magistrate, and over the next 6 months or so, they'll start to see some yield coming from that, and that will help offset some of their expenses, including training. So that's the domain part of the long campaign that the player characters should be at least preparing for, if not engaging even by mid-level.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point. Yeah, so the first few levels are going to be kind of miserable and long, but at the same time, we do know that Gygax felt like it was necessary to experience it at least once. With this whole thing about neophyte players and how you should try to start a level 1 experience kind of thing for them, rather than bringing them up to higher levels. This is one more thing I wanted to say about the whole violence thing, and that is that with that discussion, where I landed is that AD&D is pretty much about justified violence, and that's a good thing, and I like it that way because I like 3 hearts and 3 lions, and I think that having a world where good and evil and chaos and law are at war with each other is just freaking cool.
Orcs are just evil. Sorry, they just you got to stop them. That's it.
Unless you're playing OD&D, because in OD&D they can be neutral. Orcs can be neutral.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. But if we're going by, since we're kind of on the AD&D, track. But then in that case, they're evil. But even then, you can kind of justify and within even an OD&D that neutral and chaotic, like neutrality back then was just like self-interest, and chaos was entropic. So
the good or evil axis in that equation, it was kind of assumed that chaotic is kind of evil for the most part, and
not kind of, almost always evil. Almost always good.
Yeah, because the preservation of law and order is looked at as a positive thing in a world where you could have creatures of chaos wrecking shit. So
demons generally are good people.
This is an interesting question. Now I'm gonna let somebody who's done more stuff with higher level play answer this one. So the question Solrak asks is, what do you guys think are the reasons why D&D sucks through level 10 to 20?
I can only speak from my 5e experience, but I can tell you the reason being is that the DMs are inexperienced. They don't know how to handle it.
There's
It's not a fault. They yeah, go for it.
I was gonna say there's a lot more onus on the DM to make challenging play at that level, right? It's very easy. Like if we're talking about BX or AD&D or we'll just say classic D&D, right? It's very easy to put a level 1 to 3 party into a dungeon fighting slimes and zombies, right, and have it be challenging. When you get to level 15, and you got a wizard that has all these spells, and you have all these options, you have all these push button solutions. The DM has to think, how do I make this challenging without them just walking through everything?
Yeah,
and I think that's where you would need a DM that can do that and is willing to put in that kind of energy in order to make a high-level campaign good. As far as 5th edition goes, I can't say because I've never played it much beyond. I played one shot that was level 11, and that problem came up. Everything else I've played has been low level.
I've been in games where we got as high as 30th level, and they didn't know any better, and they weren't prepared for it, and we just steamrolled through everything. But then again, they wanted to tell a story, so the challenge didn't really bother them anyway. So, well, one of them didn't care. The other one kind of did. He recognized he made us way too powerful and gave us way too much stuff way too quickly. Like, I got a +3 plate mail and a +3 shield for 100 gold piece each. I bought that when I was level 4. Yeah.
Interesting.
And he struggled to hit me for like 95% of the time. So
has everybody else gone yet?
So what?
Has everybody else gone yet? I have a small spiel.
Let's hear it.
So the first reason that D&D sucks from levels 10 to 20 is that the monster manuals are designed for low-level play, or rather they are incidentally compatible with low-level play, because at lower levels you have fewer character abilities and you have fewer things, you have fewer hit points, fewer resources with which to solve your problems. The only edition of D&D that I shouldn't say it's possible. AD&D actually did resolve this in other means that people generally threw out of the game, unfortunately. But the only edition that addressed this through combat and designed it as such was 4th edition, in which all monsters had interesting abilities. All of them could be scaled up or down through relatively simple mathematical equations, because the difference between higher and lower level monsters was not whether or not they had interesting abilities. It was whether or not they had a certain armor class, hit points, and to hit bonus. And their 4th edition used passive saves rather than active saves. So the to hit bonus calculation also applied to their special abilities, would be something like strength versus reflex. So that's the first reason. Second is that whenever you design something with a 1 to 20 spread and avoid populating all of those levels with character abilities, or even, it doesn't even necessarily that you avoid populating all levels with character abilities. If you have a 1 to 20 spread, that artificially increases the different power levels that you have to evaluate across 12 different classes, now 13 different classes. And that's needlessly expansive, unless you're designing a legacy game, in which case you include 1 to 20 because prior games had 1 to 20, and it was decided that you would have levels 1 to 20 before any decisions were made about whether it was appropriate or whether there was any benefit to doing 1 to 20. If you do something like, you could condense all 5e classes down to 1 to 12, have much more satisfying progression, have a far more well-designed game, and really condense the power progression across different classes, such that you would be able to evaluate better. All right, all players get new stuff at this level, this level, this level, this level. So I need to design monsters for those 4 tiers, and everything is a lot closer. All the math is a lot closer together. Fifth edition did not do that, and historically in D&D, the designers did not do that. We have 2 legacy games, 2, well, I guess maybe technically 4 OSR style games. I don't know whether to include AD&D in that. And then we have 1 new school game. And the final thing is just lack of high level support. There's virtually no high level content out there.
Yeah, and to be fair, it seems like that is something that they're trying to address with their new stuff. Maybe there was something about how they were tweaking the monster manual to, I don't know, do something of that variety. But
an attempt was made.
Yeah, but I definitely see your point. As far as 4th edition goes, because even though I haven't played 4th edition, I have 13th Age, and just seeing how 13th Age pulls from 4th edition and a lot of the design principles, and it tries to make that stuff matter more. It's like if you encounter something that's meant for level 10 heroes, then and you're like level 8 or 7, then you're probably going to get your crap wrecked pretty hard. In a way that isn't quite the same there. But yeah, so my experience, I mean, I haven't played AD&D at those levels, so I can't speak to that at all. All I can is I can make guesses. You're not here for guesses. I have done 5th edition all the way to 20th level, and the experience was that it's hard to this player handbook I have over here, but I have a bunch of other books on top of it because I don't use it that much. Is just it's just full of freaking abilities that they're able to use, and whenever you add more abilities at every level, and then you add even more spells at every level, everything just compounds, and they get more novel and interesting ways that they can apply these things, and it just becomes more than a lot of people can consider. So what ends up happening is, number one, they end up being either just so powerful you can never expect what they're going to do, or number two, they wow, I just had a brain fart. But the I don't know. The way that I fixed it was just by not even just making everything really, well, not everything, introducing them to a very high level location. That's where planar travel enters a lot of times. Although people have pointed out that if you use the manual of the planes, that you're going to have a pretty hard time going anywhere, especially like the plane of fire. It's like, no, you're probably going to die. It's not a good idea.
But I mean, one of the best ways to combat higher level PCs, whether you're in a new school game or old school game or whatever, is just introducing, I shouldn't say just introduce asymmetrical challenges. This can be difficult to come up with if you don't have active support for it. Mm-hmm. Like you could be really good in tactical combat, but if there's an army coming to wipe your kingdom off the map, that represents a failure state that your proficiency in tactical combat is not going to help you with. For curses, diseases, ability drain, level drain, stuff like that. Like,
yeah, for me, I mean, I just introduced them to a location where the average creature was equivalent to about a level 10 character or higher.
There you have it.
And it was pretty nuts, but at the same time, it was fun. There was a lot of damage going around all over the place. A lot of crazy
rocket
I had it was kind of whimsical in some ways. I was like, if I'm gonna, to me, that's kind of what you're supposed to do with 5th edition, is you're supposed to go kind of nutty, because it's a kitchen sink fantasy in a way that I don't do with 1st edition. So
the scale of time to get there is very different between the 2 editions. AD&D,
that's true.
AD&D versus 5th edition, to get to 10th level is going to take you how long? I mean, in real life time, especially if you're using 1-to-1 time, there's a lot of time that goes to to get there. And usually by that point, like, I mean, that's what we used to do is, that, you know, once you got a certain level, it's like, oh, just start over. You know, you didn't keep pushing on. Also, AD&D's tended to flatten the level of advancement out a little bit more than 5th edition too. So like it's kind of apples to oranges there.
I can say for a fact that although it's not AD&D, but in Aaron's BX game that he ran, it took my cleric like 6 months to get to 7th level. You know, so it'll take time, and that's me playing weekly.
Especially if you're using 1-to-1 time.
Exactly. And honestly, having played Aaron in something close to 1-to-1 time, it's awesome. I like it.
It is cool beans. It is cool beans. Are you guys ready to talk about damage types?
Oh, sweet! Like different damage dice.
Oh yeah, just different ways of coming up with damage. So you know we have variable weapon damage. We have class-based damage. We have just everything's a D6. We have damage by weapon size. You know, maybe you guys can talk about what is your favorite and why. Well, what do you hate and just I don't know. That might be a good way to go about it. DK, how do you like to do damage?
How do I like to do damage? I'm gonna do the cop out and filthy fence sitter position. Say I will use whatever works best for what I'm trying to go for. But in all honesty, I'm so used to damage variability, like the BX way, that I think that would be my go-to. But I want to try all damage as D6. Like maybe modified, maybe unmodified, but I would like to try it one time for maybe a long campaign of 6+ months. Because, and maybe I'm wrong on this, and I made this argument, and I'm starting to doubt it, but I hold the position somewhat that there is like the real thing that all it takes to do to kill someone, right? To do significant mortal damage to someone is to bury a blade about a dagger length into their body and they're dead. So damage variation, looking at it from that perspective, is a little it feels weird to me if that's all it takes to like really do any kind of real harm to them. Aaron is obviously disapproving. You know how I look at damage, Aaron. You know how my brain works. I think you muted yourself, Aaron.
No, I was purposely not making any sound with my voice.
Do I agree that damage for most part in D&D is an abstraction? Yes. Do I appreciate the abstraction? Absolutely. It's a good thing. I'm just a weirdo. You know?
Oh, all right. Bloodworth had to go, unfortunately. But, let's
bye, Bloodworth.
We appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my spiel for the minute.
All right, Zervis. Maybe I won't be triggered anymore by the time we get back to me.
The only one that I don't like is D6 for everything. That's the only one that I don't like. I am perfectly good with standard. Every weapon does a different amount of damage. AD&D is what I played for 20 years before doing anything else. So it took a good decade after that for me to really just accept that, you know, versus large creatures, a greatsword doesn't do 3d6 damage or a longsword doesn't do 1d12. But I'm good with that, just variable weapon damage that makes general sense in the abstraction of things. I think that without having any proof, I think that the way that AD&D did it, as far as, you know, what you have for damage first is small, medium, and then large damage, it almost seems arbitrary the way that they assigned the numbers. I've made sense of it in my own lizard brain where, okay, if you're fighting like a hill giant, right, it's kind of hard not to get a piece of him with your sword, right? So that's kind of how I justified it, but it doesn't really hold water. As I couldn't defend it. I'm okay with it, but I couldn't defend it. How's that?
All right. Shield, if you're still around.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, I'm not really opposed to the idea of non-varied damage dice. I really, fine with it either way, to be perfectly honest. I do like the idea of there being other factors apart from damage that influence what weapon you want to use. Kind of like how
Yes.
ranged weapons, you kind of see like there's different factors with range, or a crossbow can be preloaded before combat, so you can drop your torch and fire it basically the same round, that sort of thing. You know, I like that. But damage, I'm not, tied to 100%.
Okay. All right. Ash of Creativity, you got anything?
The question is damage. What about damage?
Yeah. What kind of the different ways of deciding how much damage an attack does, between variable weapon damage, class-based damage, size of weapon size damage. What system do you like most?
I prefer hits to. I prefer character health to be expressed by character health, and ability to continue fighting to be primarily expressed through hits, and for that to be a very small number of them, and for character damage to, once it reaches the threshold, and this is where my conversational language starts going into design language. Once you reach the appropriate threshold of damage for somebody to have taken a hit, then you mark that hit down. You don't really worry about all of the fall off damage and stuff like that. I find that useful in design because, one, it lets me track how long a monster is going to last a lot easier. I could say, okay, I have 3 PCs, assuming all of them deal 1 hit per round. This 6-hit creature is going to last about 2 rounds, maybe 3 at the most. And on top of that, I don't have to worry about a lot of fall-off damage when I'm designing. I don't have to micromanage each and every character ability and its damage type and its damage values. Ditto for weapons, because I don't have to worry about somebody stacking 3 abilities, which give them deal extra 1 dice of damage, or consumable items. It doesn't have to be abilities. It can be consumable items, magic items, etc. I don't have to worry about that spilling over into triple digits and suddenly making all of my encounters meaningless. It's just you dealt more than 12 damage, so I marked down the hit. I don't do any math. I heard above this number, below this number. I do mark a hit down. I don't mark a hit down, and that's about the end of it.
It's intriguing, I have to say. Yeah. So there's a lot you could do with that. That I'm liking the idea. I'm not sure. Yeah, so it does have some serious effects there. So the granularity of just having specific, just specific numbers does add something there. Because it makes it more impactful from moment to moment. It adds more randomness as well. But what you're offering is a procedure I think that's a lot cleaner.
I get to bake my cake and eat it, or I get to have my cake and eat it too. Because all the characters still get to do I get to do this much damage. I get to do this much damage. I get to do this. At the end of the day, it still deals 1 hit.
Is this a question to you about that? Would it be easier to just move everything into the chance to hit and disregard damage entirely?
It would certainly be easier. It might not be what I desire in terms of gameplay, though.
You still want to have those thresholds, it sounds like. Like they need to do at least a certain amount for it to qualify as a hit?
Yes, that lets me set up certain monsters which a peasant under no circumstances is going to hit, is going to harm a 9th level warlord or a 3rd level banshee under this circumstance.
Okay.
I say you're just never going to do it. So there's certain value in retaining damage and hooking certain damage types onto it, because I can key monster abilities to it. I can key, and I can probably still find a way to do that without using damage. I could say this weapon, this ability gives your weapon the radiant tag, and then hook a monster vulnerability or something like that into if weapon has radiant, produce this effect.
Mm-hmm.
I could still do it, but I like at the moment, probably out of nostalgia, probably out of a desire to continue doing what I'm doing and not reinvent the wheel in that regard. But I'll probably still use damage. And players do like hooking, making bigger numbers out of things, even if they know it doesn't actually do much more.
I would also like to point out that, because I completely forgot about this metric, and Shield brought it up, is damage based on hit dice or class. That is the one method that I despise with a burning passion. I would rather Clockwork Orange style learn THAC0 for 50,000 hours straight than even entertain using that borked system. I hate that so much.
If
I
Chelsea
actually
could
hate
learn THAC0 in 2 minutes, then you shouldn't need that much Clockwork Orange.
No,
style,
I'm not
right?
saying I would. Not that I would need to.
You just
I would
okay, just being exposed
Yeah.
to it. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
I hate it because I can't wrap my head around that because someone is a certain class, they do a higher die damage with a weapon. Like a fighter with a knife will, if we're going to do the abstract way of doing things, a fighter with a knife will do more damage than, say, a thief with a spear.
Yeah.
How?
So
Like,
okay.
I get the rationale.
Now I feel like we're.
Yeah, I know. I get the rationale behind it. I just don't agree with the rationale.
I feel like
if you
now
say
we're derailing what
I'm
we were
sorry,
trying
just-
to talk about, though. Well, I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
sort of, because you were returning to the original subject, but we kind of were on a tangent about James's philosophy of this hit determination.
And by the way, it is a very interesting thing to listen to, James.
Yeah,
I will say
So,
that. But it's just,
we'll get back to that in a second,
Yeah.
DK. I want
Yeah, it's all
to
good.
see where this thing goes with James.
Yeah.
So this guy asks, Journeyman GM asks, how would you determine flesh wounds over gut wounds? I'm assuming that this was to you. So if not, then we can address it in standard D&D terms.
I'm certainly happy to hear everybody talk about it. I'll just say briefly, hit points and character health are, again, an abstraction to me. They are simply your resource of excuses for why you didn't die, for why that harmful effect did not kill you. And that applies to all enemies. So for hits might be more related to meat blood points for a dragon than they are for a warlord. With a warlord might be his acrobatic ability or his or luck.
Heart.
For a thief, they all excuses for why you didn't just die right now fall under the umbrella of hits, hit points, health, etc. But what I did with Lords of Brachus was actually included a separate list of wounds, which you would take under certain circumstances. Like, for instance, wounds are harder to recover from. They can involve critical damage to your limbs, your head, almost sort of Fallout style. But you can use them as a resource for, I want to take, instead of taking this hit, because that might drop me down to 0, or that might put me at risk for a coup de grace, or something else, I'm going to choose to take a wound. And it's going to be more difficult to recover from, and I'm going to have to roll a d6 to figure out which wound it is, but it is potentially going to save my life now. So I separated them. I did separate them entirely. And there's certain other effects and abilities which are going to inflict wounds, whether you want them to or not. But that's the idea.
So I would just say, if Journeyman GM is talking about standard D&D terms, with the way that hit points are explained in first edition, flesh wounds are going to be like more than half of your HP, and then the rest is the gut wounds. Pretty much, once you're down into the very low range, then those are the things that are representative of how tough you are, rather than how lucky you are or how able to avoid, taking serious damage. Feral Gamers Inc. asks, how would armor work with that? Then he says, unless you use AC, I guess. I think that this is intending to use AC. Unless you say otherwise, James.
Oh, Ash has gone to check the stove.
Okay.
He go AFK. Yeah, he AFK.
All right. Well, so now we can return to what DK was talking about. Now listen here, DK. So
yes,
I can accept class-based or hit die-based damage. However, I don't think that it should be the end-all be-all. Now, what I mean by that is I would kind of incorporate the same thing that I would do with weapon size damage. So,
right.
Weapon size damage. So I've seen some, it's like a tiny weapon is a D4, medium is D6, large or full size is D8, and then maybe you have like a two-handed that's D10 or something like that. Or if you hate non-platonic solids, then a D8 plus 2 or I don't know, something. Or 2D6. But anyway, so that's usual weapon sized based damage. Now what I would do is I would combine class-based damage and size-based damage to be that you use your hit die, and then if you're using a small one, if you're using a small weapon, then maybe it's either one die lower or it's like a -1, maybe. If it's regular size, it's just the regular roll. If it's a big weapon, maybe it's a +1 or something like that. That way, you're adding some kind of reason for them to not use a shield or to use a shield.
Yeah,
some kind of you need to have some kind of consequence for all that kind of stuff, in my opinion.
I think that what was my biggest sticking point for it is what happens, right? If a fresh face, we'll say, if we're going to use like Crimson Dragon Slayer is the one that I'm with this kind of concept that I'm most familiar with. Why would it be that, say, a 10th level cleric would deal less damage than a first level fighter by virtue of the fact that he's a cleric and the other guy's a fighter? That was my main contention with it. The reason why I like it should be like they should be easier to hit with the weapon, that to bonus to hit because they have higher experience makes more sense as a fighter because they're the frontline fighters. But if they're using the same weapon, how is it that just because this guy's a fighter, he does more damage versus the guy with way more experience with the weapon, but he does less damage? That's my main contention with it. To me, it breaks the verisimilitude. It doesn't make sense to me.
That the reason that the fighter does more is that he actually doesn't do more because he's going to miss more. Because his Sacco or his base attack bonus or whatever you want to call it is going to be less. He's going to hit less often. Whenever he actually does hit, it's going to be more substantial, but that's mostly going to be compared to other people that hit about as frequently as he does. Unless you're playing, well, I mean, even if you were playing something like Lamentations, where only the fighter is the one who gets base attack bonus increases, then even then, the fighter is the fighter would be better than the cleric at that point because they would do more damage and they'd hit just about the same amount often. I don't know. Dan's here.
I know.
He's
it's
also
weird
muted.
To me, that's all. Hey, Dan.
I muted myself because I got the washing machine going.
Oh, I think you need to change the battery in your smoke detector, or somebody does.
Yeah, I just did. Now it's beeping again.
There's an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia that is priceless that I will think of every single time that I hear that noise. Those who know. let's see. It's fine though. I was just messing with you. So
But-
what do you, Dan? What do you have to say about different ways of determining damage?
Yeah, I'm fine with. And I just jumped in, but I'm fine with different weapons doing different damage. I've also played it with all weapons doing D6 and just finding some other way to, differentiate them.
Base
Okay.
Dan.
Okay,
Dan
if
is
you're doing
base.
that, if
Like
you're
a,
doing that,
like
then
a big,
that's
weapon versus armor table or something like that.
okay.
Or weapons as tools, or the way I'm doing it in my game, where all weapons do D6. I may change it like we're +1s or whatever, but all weapons are tools. Well, all melee weapons are tools. They do other things like a hammer, like a sledgehammer, can break down walls, or an axe can chop wood. You're applying a different metric to the weapon that you wouldn't normally with what I've seen in regular D&D, you know what I mean? Because you're survivors. You have to use everything at your disposal. So
Yeah. So I mean, we could pull some stuff from AD&D, for instance, to add to that, in order to assist us in making the weapons feel a little bit more different. For instance, weapon length. What is weapon length good for? Well, weapon length is good for maybe saying this weapon is too long to properly wield in this area. Maybe. If you're in a crawl space, you're probably not using a pike. But yeah, for charging, definitely. Yeah. So just saying, if we're doing a charge, then forget initiative. Who's got the longer weapon?
Or to brace, like
first.
Spears brace against charging opponents.
Yes.
Just that alone.
That is true. You do have a few weapons in AD&D that, for instance, can disarm on hitting AC 8. I think it's called like the Ranseur, some crap. You have you have weapon versus armor class. I know a lot of people don't like it, but it is a thing. I'm sure some people can reference. There's probably some RPGs that have gone deeper into those things as well. Somebody said something about tags in some systems.
I think that was James. We mentioned radiant tags. That was.
Oh
Ash.
yeah.
Yep.
I like variable weapon damage. I like it because even though as Zerbus pointed out, sometimes it doesn't correlate 100% with reality, at least the way that it pans out, for especially when we're talking about versus size of creature. I like it because it adds a little bit of depth, and in AD&D specifically, it puts it where fighters are better at fighting. There are a lot of things that make fighters better at fighting in AD&D, and that's one of them. Because if you look at it, it's mostly the weapons that are available to the fighter that are pretty decent at doing damage to large creatures. You've got your two-handed sword. Well, who can use two-handed swords? Fighters.
The fighter.
Yeah. Clerics can't use that. Clerics, they're going to do maybe like a D6, maybe a D8 of damage against a large creature. And so this creates a situation where the fighter is going to be wrecking these large creatures that now you can give them more HP. I say give them. They have more HP by virtue of the fact that they almost always have very high hit dice. And because of that, they also hit very often, and they often hit like a truck. So it makes these big creatures feel like a huge threat, but you don't suffer quite the same effect of HP bloat that you would otherwise if you have a decent amount of fighters that are equipped to deal with these big honkers. They can do 3d6 damage every swing if they hit them. Maybe if they're using, that's how much a two-handed sword versus large creatures
per
does.
hit. 3d6 per hit.
Per hit. Mm-hmm.
Jeez, that's insane.
And so this comment this comment got me. My thing is lagging. Jesus says, longtime lover of the channel. What is D&D, by the way?
It is the single greatest game that has ever been invented by mankind, and anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar.
It's a game of violence.
It is a game of violence. That's a good answer.
It is. It's lots of
Glorious,
violence.
sexy violence.
We just see blood spattered everywhere. Bleh.
All right, Aaron, I got to get ready for the Cottonwood Art Festival, so I'm going to head out.
All right. Enjoy yourself, Ash. Yeah. Chat you later, man.
Please.
Yes. Oh, boy.
But yeah, so Zerbis, for me, I can excuse the idea of it on that grounds. Like,
it's gameable, which is why I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it serves a good game purpose. You know, it's not exactly a verisimilitude.
It also doesn't make sense to give an experience point for gold, right? Like if you think about it, it doesn't make sense if you think about it too hard. But it's fantastic for a gameable mechanic.
Yeah,
yes.
My ability to zero in on verisimilitude, I'm willing to suspend my need for verisimilitude up to a point.
If it's worth the gameable mechanic, then you can make the excuse for it. But if you don't see the payoff, then you're not having it.
Exactly. Yeah, I see the game payoff for the damage based on size, because I can rationalize it and it makes sense. Like, there's more meat on the creature to damage, therefore you do more damage when you hit it, but it's also harder to kill. So I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, I can internally rationalize it. So
yes. Grand Admiral Ahab reminds us, I don't know how I forgot to mention this, the second rank spear, stabby, which is something that's been in D&D for a long time.
The phalanx, the greatest formation.
It's fantastic. Yeah, we can get extra attacks on you, Buckaroo, just because we have spears. Spears are fantastic.
Can a spearman and polearmsman brace against charge if they're in the second row, or if only they're the target?
I would probably go with maybe a pike. I might let a pike do that.
Okay.
Spear. I wouldn't. As far as like what's in the rules, it doesn't. I don't think it specifies. Okay. Usually, whenever you're trying to determine stuff with charging, it's whoever the intended target is. But if somebody was behind that person using a pike, I might let them. But then again, they're also like, I probably would let them, because even though, they're supposed to be like, I don't know, like 10 yards, not 10 yards, 10 feet areas, kind of. Well, I mean, that's only if you think of it grid wise, which is really an abstraction. You could get all. This
one question spiraled into. But Zerbis, you were going to say something before.
Oh, just musing about the Eye of the Beholder games. Whenever you saw one of those like clusters of 4 skeletons came after you, and you saw that they had spears, you just knew you had to run.
Oh yeah, it's fun when you use the spear formation. It's not so fun when it's used against you.
Somebody's dying.
Especially when it's kobolds in their little hidey holes and they're just stabbing and then retreating. Yeah, that's always fun.
10-foot poles.
God, 10-foot poles. I mean, you could literally, just get a little rope. Just cut off a bit of your 50-foot rope. Just cut the top section in half, then stick the dagger in. And wrap. That's how they did in the caveman era. They just took a big stick, stuck it at the top of a stone, stuck it at the top of a stick, and then tied it with rope. And you got a spear.
So a name I don't know exactly how to pronounce, but I'm going to say Ulmil says, I've been in enough heavy rattan melees to know that no RPG has rules that replicates realistic, nor would I want to play in one.
Yeah, D&D is not a combat simulation, right?
No,
and it's funny if you think about the abstractions of HPs. If we talk about all the different ways we can handle it, meat points versus exhaustion points and all these other cute things, we can entertain that thought exercise to explain it to ourselves. But at the end of the day, when we sit down to a table, it's always just best to roll to hit and roll to see how much damage you did.
Yeah.
But
at the end of the day, we're just trying to resolve who would kill who. Yeah.
But anyone who doesn't use HP as meat points is wrong, and I hate them, and they're dummies.
Why
Yeah,
do you hate
like,
me, DK?
How tedious would it be if you tried to simulate real combat with all these?
I'll be boring.
Oh my
God.
It would take
like
you
even
4
like
hours to resolve combat.
I played for a King Arthur Pendragon game where parrying rules came up, and every time I hit, when I'm gonna parry it, and I'm like, and then mid combat, the DM just said, "Nah, we're just gonna do you roll, you hit, you roll, you hit." And it's so much easier. Just don't bother with it. AC is a good abstraction. Keep the abstraction.
Calvinani says carrying around a large fish is weird, man, when talking about the pikes. And I have to say, don't judge the Nixies, man. You know, who else are they going to travel around with?
Yes, Maliki. Yes, I know it's both. I'm just joshing. I just like my verisimilitude. That's all.
Now I'm picturing a Nixie walking around with like a giant aquarium with a pike in it. You know, walking around in a dungeon.
And I'm just imagining that pike is just a big spear with fins on it, just paddling through in a straight line.
Basically.
I just hope it doesn't hit the glass. That'd be a nightmare to deal with.
Man. Let's see. So we talked about so class-based or hit die based damage. I'm okay with that really for pulpy games for the most part. Like what's it called?
Crimson Dragon Slayer's one. You could get away with it in that one.
That is a very pulpy game. Combat is resolved quickly. Everything is snappy. I feel like it works really well. If I'm not trying to get all up into strategy, then it works really well, and that's when it excels. DCC or 5th edition, you know, those do okay because it's like, well, yeah, you got variable weapon damage, but it's pretty simple. It's pretty predictable. At the end of the day, it kind of makes it where you're really using a lot of the same choices over and over again. And that's fine. So I guess we should highlight, why would you use class-based? That's part of it, is because people want to flavor themselves like, hey, I'm a guy that uses a spear a lot. And if you're playing in a system where people don't ever use second row attacks and stuff like that, then maybe a spear fighter is undesirable. Maybe everybody wants to do longsword because then they can do D8 or D10, you know. So I see why people lean toward that. Now, just straight D6, I don't see myself ever wanting to do that, just because it's like, well, then we're getting, I mean, we're getting nothing. We're not really getting anything special out of all that. It works fine because, again, what's going to end up happening is fighters are still going to be better because they're going to have better THAC0 or base attack bonuses. So that's fine. You can use kind of whatever weapon you want. That's fine. For deciding, you know, what kind of aesthetics you're interested in. And also, I guess we could also bring in the whole point about magic weapons, because if you are using variable weapon damage, then some people might look at magic daggers as being basically useless for anybody that's not a magic user. You know, because they could just do better, right? For the most part, they'd be better off using something that is.
But here's something to consider, Aaron. As according to John D. But if you're a fighter using a pike, the fish, you still do D8 damage. Although for Crimson Dragon Slayer, it'd be D10. But that's kind of funny.
I'd allow it.
For Crimson, yeah, I'd allow that. That's kind of funny. But kind of thinking it would make 5e more interesting if they did that. Kind of funny. Barbarians do D12 damage with daggers. That'd be funny.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be okay with it. I wouldn't love it, but I'd be okay. I would probably do like D12 -1 or something. I don't know, or I'd make it a D10. I'd just like lower the die type.
Just to answer the whole obvious that the chat doesn't really agree with me. D20 D6 is based. My reason for doing it is threefold. One, it's cheap and simple for new players because all they need is a D20 and a D6 for like neophytes. Two, it kind of I wanted to do it as a challenge for a game to not have to rely on variable damage to see what kind of design would yield from that. And three, I'm a filthy FMAG simp. So
I mean,
are people just buying like a single D20 and picking D6s out of their Monopoly board? Is that how they're getting their? Because I'm pretty sure if they have a D20, they're buying a full set of dice, right?
Yeah. All D20s are sold in like full sets of.
I've seen it where you can get them
buying
in
like a 100-pack from like Amazon or something directly, where it's just D20s.
Like 45 pounds of dice delivered to you.
Yeah.
I need to buy 100-pound or poundo dice, to be honest. I really do.
I've bought 3 of those now, and so I have I have a metric ton of fucking dice at this point.
Yeah,
and
I don't know. It's just
all different styles, you know.
I'm definitely on board with your experimentation, like trying to see what it's like, and of course, I understand that you're a big fan of FMAG. It's a beautiful book.
Yeah, it's great. But I think the main reason I just wanted to be like, because there might be players who are brand new to the game I create that they might not have ever played a role-playing game before, but they'll have like people can give them a die 20 and they may have D6s lying around that they can use. Because I don't like borrowing other people's dice unless I absolutely have to. You know, and if you don't have them, like, you know, it was kind of the thing of I wanted it to be as cheap as possible for brand new players. That was another side of it. Whereas all you need is die 6s that you can get easily, and D20s, well, the DM can just lend you one of his for the day until you get your own set. That was kind of one of the reasons why I did it, but it was really more for the experimentation.
I'd say if you wanted to do a system where they don't have to invest in dice really. Run chainmail maybe, or
I do have combat. Yeah, I do have chainmail. Yeah,
so I actually tried doing a one shot with 2 die 6 to hit and D6 damage for everything, and it worked surprisingly well.
Really? Huh. That's actually really interesting. I'll have to read chainmail then because I'm getting my copy soon. So I have the PDF.
Oh, I'm just the man-to-man table or whatever, and then
yeah,
sort of ad-libbing the monster armors based on, you know, just what I eyeball them as.
Nice. That's sweet. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting Osric though.
Osric is fantastic. I'm glad that I read Osric before reading first edition, just because being able to see everything spelled out mechanically made it easier for me to understand. Like whenever I was reading the Gygaxian, I feel like I may have not contextualized it as easily as I did having read Osric first.
Yeah. Oh, Malachi says WEG Star Wars was designed so players did not need to buy dice. That's interesting.
Yes, it was. You can use board game die 6s for that.
And
it has separate issues having to count all of them and add them up every time.
But also, yeah, Malachi, I agree. You can never have too many dice. Unless you pay like $80 for one D20. Unless you pay like $80 plus shipping for one D20, which I know someone who did. Then you have too many dice. I think that's my hard cutoff. If you're spending that much money on one dice, maybe it's time to cut back just a little bit.
Well, if you're spending that much on one
novelty
die.
bronze dice or whatever.
No, it was an opal dice. It was a dice made of opal, and I'm like, how are you even going to roll that without that thing breaking? Like, why? Just
get a little soft dice tray for it. Won't break.
You better.
I actually, I bought a like a magnetic fold up padded dice tray. My group plays in bars and restaurants a lot. We don't want the dice rolling all over.
Yeah, but you were saying something, Aaron.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like we've pretty much exhausted the topics at hand. So I think it's a good place to call it, unless y'all have any last remarks or anything like that.
Just play more old school D&D.
Yes,
just it.
Absolutely.
Chainmail, OD&D, BX, BECME, AD&D, first and even second edition.
Nothing wrong with second edition. Not that I've seen anyway.
Except
not with the core.
It's just everything that came out towards 2.5.
It's that like whatever that like moral guideline that TSR wrote for the writers in the 2E era. It's just ridiculous. It's all namby-pamby.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, there is the think of the children aspect of 2E. That's true.
Yeah,
but they did,
and also the fact that there's also the taint of them. It was the addition.
Dark Sun for the win. Yes, Dark Sun's great.
I'm saying it also has the taint of them trying to kick Gygax out. So that
was before. Well, 2E came out a few years after.
Was it?
Gygax got frozen out of.
I thought that came out around the time.
It was out in 86 or 87, and then
Gygax
writing
a second edition too, and then of course he was out, and then you saw David Cook's bullet pointed list of what was going to be in second edition. I could hunt around for it, but it's out there somewhere.
This is the grognardiest of takes. Don't you mean it all started with the Greyhawk supplement?
No, everything went wrong when they wrote the rules down.
Yeah.
They started writing the rules down.
You have rules? You've been showing up the black.
It was great when it was just in Dave Arneson's head.
No rules.
Oh, God.
And if there are rules, they change every time.
No, actually, fuck that Black Arneson. It was great when it was in Dave Leslie's head.
Oh, Tim Kask would heavily disagree with you on that one, dude. He had a field day editing that stuff, so...
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate y'all stopping by. Pretty much everybody that you see here can be found on the Discord, where we chill out quite often, sometimes in voice chat. Dan has been too good for us lately. At least when I've been around on the voice chat.
I'm busy. I'm not usually free this day.
He has posted many a spicy meme that the kids would call.
Yeah, I have time to share memes. Not much else.
He's still active. I just never get to talk to him these days. So it's good to see you, man. And same thing. Well, it's pretty much the same thing with Shield. I don't get to see enough Shield these days. But yeah, thank you guys for stopping by and enlightening us all with your perspectives. Thank you, everybody in the chat, for making everything more interesting. And I think we'll end on a brilliant quote by Cal Venani. Make more friends, play more.
Yes.
Definitely. I'll put a link to the Discord description if anybody's interested in joining. So we'll see you there.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.